Today's TSK comes from Osvaldo Franco. He's been deeply enmeshed in UFO culture since he was a child, and following the development of the narrative over decades. As someone who's only been banging around these parts for the past few years, I wanted to see how he's attempted to orient himself within this confusing discourse. He's also briefly met Steven Greer, so I wanted to see if he could dial me into the true demeanor of the good country doctor. Osvaldo also differs from me in that he's experienced something extraordinary. And while I'm down to get pretty kooky, I can't say that I've ever seen or experienced something that I couldn't chalk up to a bad yam. I also wanted to find out who Osvaldo trusts, because it seems like the more I try and research this topic, the more convoluted it gets. This is also my first time video editing, so don't be surprised if things get a little cheesy. Osvaldo, thank you so much for coming on. I know from listening to your prior interviews that you've had some experiences, but from those interviews, I hear you and others referring to yourself as a UFOlogist. So since I'm a big fan of just kind of defining terms and knowing, where we're standing, could you just take a second to define what you think a UFOlogist is and what categorizes you as a UFOlogist?
Well, ideally, it is the scientific study of the UFO phenomenon. Unfortunately, in practice, it turns into religion and religiosity and things that really take us dangerously away from our objectives. And I think that honestly, I believe that this is the most important subject in the world at period. I just think that it's something that most people still are largely unaware of for now. I believe that that is going to change. It's almost like experiencer is my ethnicity, ufologist is my profession. I will make my decisions based on my profession and my statements based on my profession and what I can, to the best of my ability, surmise is what's actually physically going on. I will try to make, if I have a theory, I will make it, I'll tell you it's a theory. If it's something I'm guessing, I'll tell you it's a guess. If it's something that's a fact, I'll make the distinction that this is a fact, just to be clear. That's another thing too, not enough people are very clear in what their statements are in this field.
Yes, and that's something that I definitely want to try and do as we go forward through this interview, is just kind of try and nail down things, what we're talking about, and the specifics for sure. So could you tell us what your catalyst for getting involved with ufology was?
Okay, well, when I was a little boy, I was on the roof of my building with my mother. And
you were 7, is that correct?
Yes.
7?
This is in New York City, Upper West Side. And my mother is disabled. And we live on the 4th floor of this building. And they would have tenants meetings. And because there's 2 buildings that are cooperative, they're privately owned. And they would have the tenants meetings every month. And my mother, instead of going down 4 flights of steps and up, another set of steps, would just go across the roof, the easiest way to go about it. And we would meet an upstairs neighbor on the way up, and then we would go over there and we'd come back, and I was too little to be left alone.
So there were 3 of you on the roof?
Yes, there's 3 people there. And what happened is that my mother and her friend are making jokes in Spanish. And I'm a kid, I don't care. I'm just walking, and then I hear this deep sound. There's this boom, boom, boom sound. It sounds like, now as an adult, it sounds like some type of some type of energy generator or something electrical. And this, it's like a type of distortion. And I'm thinking to myself, as a little boy, what's that sound? And then my mother's like, what's that sound? And they look, and her friend, they look left and right. And I'm a little boy, I don't know any better. I followed the sound because it was coming above us and basically right overhead.
And how tall is this building? Are you on
we are it's a 5-story building. The roof would be 6. However, we're in Manhattan Valley on the Upper West Side. So we're actually at a slant and we're at the top of the hill.
So to paint a picture for us, you're not surrounded by skyscrapers, but there are tall buildings around. And you're
we have some, it's a valley. It's weird. It's on the flatter parts, there's tall buildings. And then as you go up into the side. Are you
in the Hudson Valley?
Oh, I'm on the Upper West Side, which is a part of the Upper West Side is a part of the Hudson Valley. The Hudson River goes right through there.
Okay.
So that's people don't think of it like that, but exactly where it is. The thing is, what happened was we saw basically 8 to 10 lights. Like then they were basically on this giant, it was a solid object. It was round.
So one object.
Yes. It was
5 or 10
round.
lights.
Yes. Like just basically pulsing away. And we're looking up like, wow, this was amazing. And it was literally like hemispheres, like little ball, like half balls. And the thing is like pulsing and pulsing and pulsing and pulsing, and then goes boom, and it's gone.
And
And
I know
then-
you're 7, but from your memory as well as you can, how high above you do you recall this being?
Oh my God. Like this thing was up, like this was like right overhead, maybe 20 feet.
Oh, okay. So it's
like
close.
This was enormous. Yeah.
And is this?
This was over. Yeah. This
Okay.
was enormous. This was huge. This was not like we didn't see a point of light in the sky over there. This was a big thing that was a machine that was on top of us.
And you heard it before you saw it.
Yeah, this was a device.
Mhm.
And basically, then, and the thing is, yeah, we heard it first. We saw it. It was overhead. We saw it for a good while, and then it just blinked away. Like it just pulsed away, and it didn't zoom off. It didn't, like break up into a bunch of pieces and fly away. It was just gone.
Okay.
Like just like boom, like it turned itself off.
Okay.
And,
So you don't have a sense of how it just 1 minute there, next
and then it
second
was
gone.
just- yeah. It's.
And you
like,
said this lasted 4 minutes. Is that what you said in another interview?
Yeah, this was a
somewhere.
good. Yeah, this was not a 30-second, a 10-second. Like we were like holy, like looking at the thing. Like.
Do you recall which each individual person was doing at the time that it's above, or is everyone sort of ensconced of their own experience?
We're looking up. Like honestly, I'm not really paying much attention to it at this point. Like this was just, I don't think anybody was paying attention to like what we were like, anybody else was doing at the time. This enormous, like this doesn't happen every day.
Right.
This is like we have a lot of airplane traffic. We have a lot of helicopter traffic. If you have a beam of light coming down your window at night in this neighborhood, it's 99% of the time a police helicopter. That being said, this is not normal. This is not a usual at all. This was not some type of plane that we mistook, and I don't think they're test flying some type of secret craft like that over New York City.
I caught this very briefly, and I couldn't tell if I was misunderstanding it from another interview, but I thought you said that there was a news report from that night.
Oh, yes.
Do you happen to have that news report?
No, this was what, 1986? Like we didn't have a VCR. No, those things really didn't, like, that was just before all of that. But it was on the Fox network. Well, rather, it wasn't Fox, it was Channel 5. And this was before, I'm dating myself, this is before Rupert Murdoch created Fox and like swallowed up all the local affiliates and then, turned them into Fox. So
you said 1987 is the year?
86, 87. And basically, like there's, and honestly, I did not know UFOs existed. I was a little boy. I had no like concept of these things. And the weird part is that I was always like, I was born space mad. Like I was always into like I didn't really like science fiction. I was always into NASA and like, what, like, rockets were being built and satellites and things like that. And it turns out that, all right, this is where the story gets crazier. Yeah, both my mother and my grandmother were deeply into UFOs.
And you said your mother went to conferences and had a closet full of books?
Full of books, yes.
Why do you think she hadn't shared that interest with you before this point?
My father was vehemently against these things.
Okay.
My father was vehemently against these things. And my mother felt, well, I was young. When I was older, if I had questions, she would have those books and I would be able to ask those questions because like we always had an interest, in the family. So it wouldn't have been out of the question. The thing is though, like fate had other plans. So
what were your discussions with your mother? And if you saw that friend on a semi-regular basis, did you all speak about the event? Did you talk about it to this day?
Oh, I spoke about it with my mother many, many times. This became you have to understand when this happened and I found out about UFOs. All right, well, this is what happened. It was they spoke about it on television. Like this was like a big deal. People saw this.
Your mother spoke about it on television publicly.
No, my mother didn't speak about it. We weren't on TV. We were not on television. We saw people talking about it. Again, this was big news locally. because like thousands of people were seeing UFOs.
Yeah,
Like in and
so
around this.
I know a little about the Hudson Valley sightings. I know Hynek wrote a book about
Yeah, no,
it.
this was huge, extremely intense.
Mhm.
Like there was a couple of years where like even like in New York City, even in this area where there's a lot of activity in and around the river. So and like in a lot of like 90s ufology, actually they discussed that, especially the New York City based stuff that was going on. There was a lot of activity for a while, like for years, and then it started slowing down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So what happened was, my mother had these books, and I just devoured them. I was a very studious kid, and I just basically read everything. But then my mother would also go to these like seminars and lectures, and I would go with her. And basically, I'd spend whatever money I had on books. And I started reading all of the books, and I would go with her, and I would speak to the lecturers, and I basically, I because I was a kid, I had more time than most people. So I basically quite rather quickly over a couple of years, I amassed like a lot of information about the subject. And then when I was around 10 years old, I started giving lectures, a little like, lectures at like, like little UFO clubs and
Mhm.
like little local groups and things like that. And so on and so forth. And then I became somewhat known, and I got involved with experiencer groups as well at a very young age, as well, literally like at 13. As soon as I was old enough to go someplace by myself, I literally like went in, and I by accident ended up finding one of the premier UFO experiencer groups ever, one of the first ones, which was called Space. And I very quickly got into like very high levels in that group.
Because as someone who is new to the discourse, which is to say the literature that already exists on the topic, there are so many names, there are so many stories, there's just so much information that for someone relatively new to the topic, and I think that's where my perspective and my interest really is at this point. How does one even go about orienting themselves to the massive amount of information, the fraudulent
Oh,
actors?
no, well, this is the thing. It's easier said than done, and honestly, it takes a lot of time and energy, and you're gonna screw up a lot. There's stuff that you're gonna get into, like I forgive myself. I was a child, but there's stuff that you're gonna be into, and you're gonna investigate that's just not gonna pan out. Most of it won't, especially the most sensational stuff. If something sounds quasi-religious, I don't really touch it, like at all. I'm very much against religion and religiosity. Spirituality is just watered down religion. It's gobbledygook. It's whatever you want it to be at the time. However, that's how you feel. It's just non-committal religion, but it's still the same. Like it's almost worse. It's like at least a Catholic has fixed beliefs. Even if they're in conflict with how they actually feel, they will go and write a book about that and cite things.
And I
Whereas
think the perception is that UFOlogy or aliens is not going to fall into the same traps that already exist for religions.
yeah,
But
but it's exactly the opposite.
the rhetoric is almost exactly the same.
Yeah, and that's what happens when people that don't have the discipline that is required to do scientific research go into things that are inherently scientific.
And
But
to know, I mean, you've got to know politics, you have to know
yeah, no,
science, you have to know the history of the topic. It's
yeah,
truly
no, listen,
overwhelming.
I have to keep up on theoretical physics. I have to keep up on the aerospace industry. I have to keep up with things that are going on allegedly with intelligence agencies. I have to keep up with politics, who's doing what in different countries. All of these things. It's very involved if you're going to really try to be a part of this and try to move the ball forward.
Well, can you kind of familiarize us with what the Hudson River or Valley, excuse me, sightings were at that time?
Well, basically what happened was is that in and around Hudson Valley, New York, there were these massive sightings of these craft, like circular craft and even wedge-shaped craft that would actually come overhead, like exactly the same thing that happened to me. And basically lights would be shown down on people, like whole communities, hundreds of people would see these at once. And the thing is, the craft would get low. And most of the Hudson Valley is actually suburban. So these things were directly over people's homes. I don't know, like, honestly, I think they were, whoever was flying that thing wanted to be seen. That was done deliberately. Like that to me, I think that was like.
What makes you confident this is alien as opposed to governmental?
It's been going on for well too long. It's going on well too long. In too many places, you know, like honestly, like barring time travel, which is a possibility, it just doesn't make enough sense to me.
So mostly sense. It's the time that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then it's like it's basically like, well, all right, we're dealing with like hyperdimensional physics. It's looking like, or something like it. So like, if you have the ability to go through different dimensions, could they be time travelers? Yes. Could they also be from another planet? Yeah, because you would actually use the type of technologies they're using would kind of coalesce or coincide. They're trying to do both of the same things. Like if you're from another dimension, and you want to get to this dimension, you would use a similar probably technology as the other beings that are from another planet that are trying to, you know, use hyperspace to get to here faster and back. You know, so it makes sense that it could be, you know, multiple factors. Like I've heard, the rumor is that there's 4 factions.
When you say factions, do you mean like species or?
Yeah, there's okay. There's 4 that they know of, and this is the rumor, and there's one that they don't know who it is. Like there's like 3 that they have reasonable amount of information about, allegedly, and then there's another one that is just like a mystery.
And is this something that you've spoken with your mother with as well? I mean, has she publicly gone on record and talked about the sighting?
My mother is not like involved in it like that. Like I was the one that did like the public speaking. I was the one that went out and, you know, did like, you know, like gotten really into like research and stuff. My mother, unfortunately, went more into the spiritual path, and which is not my thing. It was never my thing.
So she does not want to publicly speak about the sighting.
My mother has dementia. I take care of my mom, so that's, you know, there's that. But that's basically it. Like I did most of the talking and most of the lecture giving, you know, and the interview doing and things. So that's it. My mom's not like that aggressive when it comes to that.
And I thought you had mentioned in one of the other interviews that this was not your only experience. If you don't want to talk about the other, okay.
No. Okay.
Do you want to mention something else that happened? Because I've only heard you reference that particular event.
I'll tell you what. Well, I don't really discuss a lot of what's happened to me, and the reason being, well, it's several fold. When I was young, I was much more open. And there's like video footage of me somewhere of discussing things that I just don't talk about because it wasn't, it wasn't a good thing for me to be that open about it. People were not ready for that. So I don't speak about it. And part it was that, and the other part is there have been times where I've been able to determine when somebody's full of BS or not, because they made a reference to something that I know personally, because I've seen it myself. So that is something that helps me, and when I informs my decisions when I do my research.
So it's both therapeutic to talk about it, but if you have a negative interaction, it's kind of like a mental health setback from sharing the experience.
I don't, not really. I don't really have this like talking about it isn't really like a traumatic. Like I'm not really. I don't feel trauma about this at all. It's never been this thing of fear with me. Never been afraid. If they came today, I would go towards them. You know.
Does it bother you when you can tell that people aren't aren't open to the possibility, but when they just totally don't believe it? Like, what is that sensation for you?
Well, I'm used to that. I live in New York City. I'm Upper West Side. It's a bunch of intellectuals, basically the university town for the most part. I'll put it to you this way. for years, officially, this was something that people didn't want to talk about, but there was a lot of stuff going on, like behind, like, like there were groups and stuff that were like, involved with like high level people, like famous folks. Again, I don't talk about my, I know some people that are very much into UFOs, and I'm not going to mention who they are. You would know who they are. And it's been like that since the 80s and stuff, like these groups that some like with that, and they have lectures by big names, people who you would recognize in field, and they're attended by people with big names that have nothing to do with UFOs.
It's definitely getting more accepted to, like, I can go into my office and rattle off some notions or opinions or research I've done about UFOs and not have a negative interaction. But I don't think that was always the case necessarily. I think even 10, 15 years ago, if you entertained the possibility, it's like, stamp, you're labeled a kook.
Oh yeah.
End of conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing. It's like, it bothers me, but not so much in the sense that, like, I know this is going on. I know this is real. I've seen this up close, intimately, more than once. I've been, one way that my life has really, truly been very fortunate is to be able to have seen that. So it's like, you think I'm crazy, you're an idiot. And then like it doesn't like really affect you. It's also about the grand scheme of history and the grand scope of things. Like I can tell you that the people that used to make fun of me when I was a kid, the ones that I run into, almost all have apologized. Almost all of them. Like life is long. It's like kids who used to beat me up in high school went to jail, and then they ended up reading the books that I tried to get them to read, and then they came out like scholars in those things in their own right, apologized to me. Like, no, I was completely wrong.
Well, and I know what got me back into this, or more actively researching this was, and I think this is true of a lot of people that are entering the discussion now, are those military videos, the gimbal, the tic tac, etc. Yeah. I think that coming from that source gave people that were already entertaining those notions,
yes, the
credibility that they needed to start.
Yes, mm-hmm. Exactly. And now we're seeing the entrance of into ufology, of like actual, like, mainstream scientists, and like Eric Weinsteins and the Kurt Dremungels, and so like this really like makes me like I'm and as a science guy myself, this is what I've wanted. Mm-hmm. Was for like the type of involvement and the type of people that are getting involved now. Exactly what we need. We need less metaphysics and more metamaterials. That's what's going to get us out from under. Physical proof. Mm-hmm. Nothing, no channeling, no faith. None of that ends this debate. Physical proof does, and we're on the case to that. Mm-hmm. We're this close. Just
well, as a non-experiencer, I appreciate that sentiment, because I don't know how to have a conversation with someone who is an experiencer that doesn't understand the perspective of, I have not seen something extraordinary. So the hill to climb to belief, therefore, is much steeper.
And there were organized efforts to discredit the subject for generations. Like we know this as a fact. Like this is basically already come out. Once we get the congressional, like there's an effort right now that Kurt Dremungel and Lou Elizondo were trying to spearhead, called UFO Amnesty, or hashtag UFO Amnesty, a while back. And basically it's because they're going to need it. There's going to be a lot of really like awful things that come out when people do this type of skullduggery. Like there's been terrible things, that have been done in the name of trying to keep this a secret, that have to come out, because they need to bring it out. And it's like,
and that's another reason it's difficult for someone wanting to sift through the information to ever find a footing. So I specifically mentioned it was the gimbal video that got me sort of more intensely reading and checking in every once in a while. And although I don't know the arguments for how the gimbal video is either inaccurate or a hoax or whatever, I do know those arguments exist. So what does one do when faced with the fact that every time they find something that begins to feel credible, there's 10 other people that's like, I've got an explanation for you. This is what it is.
No, there's a lot of that too. And that's also like science though. Like in science, you have a lot of that. There's like, a bunch of professors, true. Each one has a different explanation, and,
that's true.
Everybody knows they're a genius, and like, they should really talk to them about it because they know, like, and you see that in ufology as well. There's like huge egos, huge egos, like and undeservingly so, and the people with the biggest egos are the ones that have, like, like, don't have the reason for it. It destroys, like these efforts, and I mean, my God, if we could just streamline our efforts and get like what's being trying to do now with like things like Galileo Project and TTSA and other organizations that are starting to like pop up. We continue to do this. Listen, all the progress we've made, like 70 years plus, and we've only made progress in the last 4 years. That's it.
It's definitely clear that the conversation changed around that time. I mean, I think that's why I'm here.
All the progress that's happened, and I've been doing this for 30, so I've seen about half of this. All happened in the last 4 years.
What event, I mean, obviously the formative event of being 7 years old and seeing something in the sky was like what ticked the dominoes, but what led you to discovering Greer? What put you on the road to, I mean, I know he did dominate the conversation.
Well, yeah, so I had been involved with ufology, like formally, for like over a decade when I met Steven Greer.
And when you say involved, that means you have your
lectures, like
going
traveling to do stuff, like all of this. The things that one did in the 90s, the lecture circuits and the groups and the.
And do these still exist? Are they still robust?
Yes, some of them still do, but they're a lot of them are like, everybody in them is old. Like you have to understand, I was 13 and everybody else was like 40. And now then there are a few of them left, and everybody's kind of old and they're married to their stuff, which is older folks. That's what they do. God bless them all, is what it is. But like I was saying, I was involved in ufology, and we had heard a while back about something called Project Starlight.
Yes.
A guy named Steven Greer, and he was doing these things where he was summoning UFOs. And this is very interesting.
Does this predate the National Press Club conference? So what year are we now?
A few years before that. That was in the 90s. That was in the 90s.
Okay, so this is mid to late 90s.
Yes.
National Press Club is 2001, if I'm not mistaken.
This was before that. And you heard blips, because again, there was no internet like that. It was all mailing groups and things like that. Word of mouth, people would, somebody would travel and like to someplace and go and bring back word of mouth or something they had seen from over there, and that was like what we had. And things were a lot slower back then. And
so now we probably have a much faster
absolutely
way to find what's bullshit. And
exactly, yeah, it was a lot easier to maintain these types of scams
and get away with murder and everything. Exactly.
Never. Now you get caught in things like I remember the Roswell slides from a few years ago. There were those the Roswell slides. They were Don Schmidt brought them up. It should have been a big red flag. It should have been.
I'm not familiar with Don Schmidt.
Yeah, Don Schmidt has been caught in certain. Let's just say there are issues with his research frequently. And he's actually admitted it, and people don't care. Like this is how.
Well, I appreciate him admitting it, because Greer, I don't think, is ever going to recant anything that he said.
He's the new L. Ron Hubbard. He's a faith healer who wrestles giant squids. and does like ridiculous things, and they offered him $2 billion. Uh, you know, it's
His
just like,
greatest regret is that no one has been as brave as he was. I mean,
exactly.
it's
It's
amazing.
amazing. I know, my God. Like I would love to make a film about his life, but like just make it like how he describes it though.
Well, I'm sure someone eventually will. And I think conversations that identify the holes in his rhetoric are important because, to a lot of people, they're like, why are you even talking about Greer? Greer's obviously a fraud. And it's like, well, it might seem obvious to a great many people, but there are a great number of people that, for lack of a better word, see him as a Messiah figure. I
Yes,
mean,
no, that's again,
so
that's another problem. Whenever there are no messiahs, there's no messiahs. Please stop trying to worship this subject and these beings. Stop trying to replace Jesus with, with the Anunnaki. It's not gonna. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. You're making the same mistake again. Yeah, you're changing adornment. It's a cosmetic change, nothing more. You're not going to get any closer or any faster to what we're trying to get to, and that's the people substitute. People are looking. It's some of us want answers. Other people want a religion. They want a true religion, and there isn't one, and they're not going to get one.
That's another reason it bothers me to allow Greer as a public figure. Like I know on some level it's like, so what? Someone pays $3,000 to go on his trip. Like lots of people charge exorbitant amount of money for things that are essentially useless. I don't know that offends me any more than any number of things going on in the world. But when you have people that the people that are coming to this are people that are searching for something, which is to say they're probably not at an excellent point in their life. And to me, that's predatory to bring people in.
Yeah, no, you listen, man, you could have wrote science fiction. Tom DeLonge is writing UFO books that are science fiction. Why didn't you do that? You don't have to bewilder people with nonsense. And like it's just like it's sad. It's a waste of time. It pisses me off because I've seen people's lives ruined. I've seen people's lives destroyed. I've seen people get divorced who had good, happy relationships, but because like somebody got played and went off the deep end, they're not in them anymore. And their families are suffering. Like many times. Not just once. These aren't isolated, and then you see these weird manipulative sociopaths, like some of them in little cliques, some of them in big cliques, pulling strings and playing games. But not only that, then they try to weaponize them against those of us that are actually trying to do the work because both of us really cannot coexist. There's no room for both the spiritual ufology, and actual scientific study of UFOs. Now, that being said, does that mean there's nothing to some of the spirituality stuff? No, there is, but that is consciousness research. That has also been given a bad name. It's like spirituality is a toxic mold that grows over consciousness research and UFO research. And you got to constantly be scraping it off. And unfortunately, most people are addicted to it. That's the long and the short. That's like it's sad. I think that the only thing that's really going to stop that is disclosure. One, because information will come out, and two, the rest of the world is going to turn around and come towards this subject en masse. At some point, everyone's going to have to come to Jesus on this matter, and it's going to happen all at once.
And I definitely I think I want to close this interview out kind of hearing what and when you think disclosure may or may not happen. But to return to Greer, he was not at the time that you were going to this conference. It wasn't as well known that, I mean, he hadn't started like the CE5 app at that point. I mean,
no,
iPhones,
not at all. But
right.
What happened was the next time we heard of Steven Greer was Disclosure Project. Starlight had turned into Disclosure Project. And there was excitement. It was palpable. Like everybody, like, there's a guy, he's got everything. What? He's about to drop this out like in public. Like now they're getting ready to do this.
And for all my criticism of Steven Greer, if you could suck me from this time and put me in that time,
Yeah,
I
you
am
would have been-
sure I too would be stoked.
Said quite rightly, we were. We were ready for something big, and Greer was the impetus for that. Like it or not, he did this. You have to give credit where credit is due. You have to be fair, you know?
And I have, in my discussions with other people, a number of people have said, listen, old Greer was not the same Greer as new Greer. And I'm not, I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with his whole progression to be able to speak to that. But when I've heard that, I'm like, okay, maybe I do need to go back and watch and listen to some of his older stuff.
I would say this. Given the situation that I had with Greer, he always had weird sociopathic tendencies, in my opinion. So that was already there. That didn't develop. I don't think those things, because you come in with those things. You don't,
or you get a TBI, or something happens. Yeah. Okay.
You have a personality quirk that predisposes you to that type of,
right.
character flaw.
It's not just like a bad egg. So what was the conference? When was it happening? What was the purpose of it?
All right. Well, this was like basically an introduction to what was going on for the Disclosure Project.
Okay.
And so we were excited.
And this is happening in New York?
Yes. So this was on it was on the east side, actually across the street from Central Park. It was one of these fancy ballrooms that they had, auditoriums right around that area. And a lot of us, everybody in ufology that was local went. Like everybody was like really, really excited. We had heard so much.
Do you remember if there were cameras in the room? Was this being recorded?
There was like one camera though. It wasn't like, there wasn't a press, like a huge press event. It was just basically somebody that worked with Steven holding a camera while Steven spoke. And he did like a brief introduction. And then we saw the first half of the Disclosure Project. And he did a brief Q&A. And I asked him if, because he was talking about anti-gravity devices, and it was, because this is all a part of this. And he was saying that that they had anti-gravity and these technologies, and I asked him, do we have like a space program of some sort?
Is this like a Q&A at the end, or have you approached him?
It was in the middle. It was in the middle of it, because then we saw the second part afterwards. I'll get into this one. So Greer goes and he said, like, no, there's no secret space programs. This is just sitting in a hangar, not being used by anybody, which has changed. Now he says.
Yeah, I was just about to say. I mean, I've heard about his USAPs.
Yeah,
many.
That is different. That has changed. But he also said something very interesting. He also said that he knew how to make an anti-gravity device, and he said that he could make an anti-gravity device that he could, like a proof of concept, that he could stand on it in the auditorium and fly around the auditorium in this anti-gravity device, and that if all he would need to build it is $500,000, which was just like amazing. Like I remember thinking to myself, well, how do I get this $500,000?
Pass around the the offering plate.
Yes, exactly. And wouldn't you know, Greer was taking donations.
Oh.
What a shock, and selling merch and stuff like that. And
what I would give for vintage Steven Greer merch, that would just be hilarious to me.
It's low quality, self-published. Like nothing nice. I'd be surprised if any of it survived. But so we sit through the lecture. We sit through the other presentation, and then he's outside, in the hallway, and he's speaking to people. And the thing is, like I said before, my mother's disabled. I brought my mother with me. We had to we have to plan things. We have to make sure, we have to get her downstairs, and then we get her over there and then back, and and my mother really wanted to see this. We were like thrilled. So. And
you're approximately how old, and she's approximately how old?
I think I'm 20, 21. I was in college at the time studying physics. And he was saying, well, we need physicists and people to do this research. And I was like, I'm a physicist, I'm an experiencer, and I'm like, I'm a physics student, I'm an experiencer, and I've been doing like the ufology my entire life. Like I'm going to go to this man and I'm going to dedicate, my life to making sure that this goal is attained, especially after the things that he had shown. Like, put it in that perspective. Like, and this was like 1999-ish or so. Like, this was like incredible. And I'm like this nice, young, enthusiastic, science kid. And I go up and this was after my MTV special. By the way, I forgot. Like I had become so known enough in UFO circles.
And I'll be sure to link to the special so people can see it.
Like I did a lot of local news, like in here, or like when I would go to like say California or Virginia to like a MUFON thing or something, they would like have a little clip of me talking or something in the news and things like that. So I was known, and I had worked with, like I said, this group called Space, and we were affiliated with John Mack and Bud Hopkins. As well. And in fact, both would come to hear us talk about our experiences. And sometimes things that were discussed in our meetings would find their ways into the books that they would publish. So because of that, when MTV came calling, they were like, we're a young person that's into UFOs. You got any? And I was like, yeah, there was one. So by default, I was the guy that got the MTV special.
And the special's fun. I mean, I think people should check it out for no other reason that it's like vintage 90s alien
UFO
TV.
nostalgia, circa X-Files type.
It's got a great kooky tone. It's fun. It's definitely fun.
Yeah, no, it's weird. It's like it's montages of Will Smith, Marilyn Manson, and me. But anyway, so I was somewhat known at this point, and I'm going to see Steven Greer. I'm going to speak to this man. And I introduced myself. And I'm like, well, Dr. Greer, my name is Osvaldo Franco. I'm studying physics. I dedicated my life to, ufology. I was the subject of an MTV special. You might have seen it or heard of it, And he basically looked at me oddly. And he's like, well, who sent you here? I'm like, huh? Like, like just like really hostile, like just like on some bizarre, like I wasn't expecting,
because he was suspicious of you, right? Like
like oddly, like what? Like,
combative.
Yeah, dude, I could not come to you with a more open heart or with open hands. You know what I'm saying? Like you asked for assistance and I'm coming running. This does not make sense. This doesn't add up. So long story short, I left. Right, my mother's smiling. She's seeing me coming down the hallway. What did he say? What did he say? I didn't want to say anything to her because, like, now she knows. She's upset now. She does not like Steven Greer anymore. But I didn't want to like do that at that point, And even then, I was still mulling over my head. What in the hell? And you're a kid. You think maybe this me? It's like, no, this is like, you couldn't have been nicer. This guy couldn't have been more of a jerk. And then, over time, you start hearing stories of things like that or situations like that. And then there's weird things that happen with with how he goes about his CE5s and these, and these interactions with these, the people that he takes on these camping trips, and then like, you start hearing him talk about things like, for instance, last week, pardon me, no, it was yesterday, pardon me, it was yesterday, the day before, he did a live stream where he was talking about how he had basically he's going to do a CE5 and that they were selling out the tickets at about 450 people per CE5. Now, the thing is, he charges around $3,500 a pop per person to do these trips.
Seems like you could probably get to $500,000 pretty fast that way.
No. How about for the trip he's doing that's coming up now, 450 people at $3,500 a pop is $1,575,000.
So we can get 2 anti-gravity devices
and a cushion to like, in an ad campaign to acknowledge its existence.
Mhm.
And the thing is, he was supposed to have that done 20 years ago.
Mhm.
You know how long he's been doing this? How many decades he's been doing this, making money like that?
Mhm.
Have you seen his house?
I haven't seen his house, but I
Oh
would
no, see
love
his
to.
house. He was bragging. He has, I think, like he had the. He was bragging that he had the largest solar array in the state that he lived in. That was in private use in his house. Those are expensive.
Mhm.
Those are really expensive, and the homes are beautiful. And like he has like Stephen Greer is not living in a tenement. Like the struggling to fight the cause because the man is has deplatformed him, and he and his life is in
Right, which
danger. No, none of
is
this.
why I would like him to spend a little bit more money keeping his website from having broken links and
Yeah.
just otherwise very difficultly searchable terms. I mean,
Well, I think also that one of the reasons why, like, he used to have stuff that was up and now it's down. I think it's because, again, people are getting more informed, and that stuff isn't cutting the mustard. Like it's becoming a liability, to his continuing to do this, especially now that, unfortunately, like, celebrities are getting involved with him, and which is like the worst thing ever. These people that aren't like, spoiled brats that are, used to getting what they want are now like teaming up with Steven Greer. It's like, it's like, great, more sociopaths
well, and
in this
it's in
field.
vogue to, I
Yeah,
would say, to be into aliens right now.
but at the same time, I also think that he's starting to realize that the writing is on the wall, that this is not going to continue for a whole lot longer. So he's trying to do what he can. But at the same time, if you check out interviews with Lou Elizondo, he insinuates that there might be certain issues with things that have gone on with Greer that could come up again and would actually be a scandal. Fingers crossed. I think that I look forward to, like, people finding out the truth about many things.
Well, I think if he was mistreating people on a large scale beyond just yourself, like there's only a matter of time before
Oh yeah, no,
more of those stories.
those things leak, especially nowadays.
Mhm. And review that I mentioned that someone had left on Amazon on one of his books, and it's a review. There's no way for me to track back whether this is legitimate or not, but the person says that they were becoming quite uncomfortable about him as the workshop progressed, the CE5 workshop, and their discomfort turned to dismay as they watched how rudely he treated some attendees who asked valid questions or made
Yes.
harmless remarks, but whose timing or subject he deemed inappropriate. So once again, I can't know that this is legit. I would love to talk to this person. I would
Yeah,
love
but
to
it
find them.
sounds like I'm describing the same guy, right?
That's what I'm saying, is
But
these
no, but
things
then
align.
on top of that, what the situation happened with Daniel Sheehan recently. And Daniel Sheehan is an actual humanitarian. Daniel Sheehan worked with Greer to try to get these, because when you're doing this type of stuff at that level, yeah, you need legal protection, absolutely. But then to turn on him like he did, because he's trying to help Luis Elizondo get things done.
Greer turned on
Daniel Sheehan,
Mhm.
because like, honestly, Greer's trying to protect his little, like, scheme, in my opinion,
Mhm.
for as long as he possibly can.
Well, and he's spoken out against Leslie Kahn.
Oh yes,
He's
no,
spoken out against Gary Nolan.
Yes, exactly, people that ask questions and aren't following him along like they're puppies, like they like this is like, I don't know. It's like, I think some people are just hardwired. They need that in their lives, and there's others of us that just can see past that.
But there's got to be, there's got to be a way to either show people or develop a way of looking at information or rhetoric that prevents people from falling into these traps. I mean,
well, there's attempts like Elizondo has that the AI app.
I haven't heard of this either.
He has an AI app that at some point will be made public, and basically you can funnel UFO videos in it, and it tells you if it's real or not, and it actually will tell you what it is. Like it can identify the type of plane.
And is
if it is
this
a plane
an
or
app that exists now, but only people in a limited capacity
yeah,
have it, or it's something
well,
that?
I know Elizondo has one, and that he's using it now to check out certain video footage, and it literally tells you if it's a plane or a helicopter, which design, what type it is, or if it's a legit unknown.
I wonder, I know, so you have an
Things like
interview
that
coming
will
up with
help.
Disclosure Team,
Yes, I
I
do.
believe, and Shane interviewed previously. His YouTube channel is called Just Johnson. He also lives in the Springfield area and spotted and something that appeared to be a UFO
Over the strip club.
yes, over
Yes,
over
yeah,
the
no,
strip
that's
club.
yeah. Lou ran that through the AI. And the AI
Yes. So is that what you're
yes,
talking?
yeah, and it
Okay.
came back as a legit unknown.
Mhm.
Things like this are going to help a lot. Things like this, because like you have these these channels that just spread nonsense and drama. Like I'm like honestly, like we're trying to do legitimate work here that's going to like benefit the humanity as a whole, and we need it fast. And this might be the only avenue to get it. And these people are playing games, and it's like it's not even just like not have a sense of humor. Yes, have a sense, but there's a difference between joking and deliberate sabotage. And the fact that it's coming in a lot of cases from inside the UFO community, that says a lot. There are people that are worried. They're not going to be able to sell you what they've been selling you once the mystery is gone. This only works when they get to play keep away, and they're the only source or avenue for this information, or to teach or touch or talk to these beings. And what happens when that's not true anymore,
Right.
or it's unveiled that was never true at all. And that's like it's a very interesting and cathartic experience. I believe that for several reasons, and I'm going to like be talking more about that this soon. I'm going to be working on another project about why I think we are maybe 10 years away from something happening. And
so you do believe disclosure will happen, and that's your general time frame.
I believe that there's too many things all coalescing at around the same time. I'm going to actually be discussing that in the video that the documentary that I'm producing right now. There's certain technologies that exist now that didn't exist before, or are in some cases being brought out that did exist before and are actually being brought into the forefront now. There's a lot. We know that UFOs are coming in greater numbers. There's too many things going on. It's like a perfect storm. We're like too many factors are coalescing. And I think that's one of the reasons why this is coming out. They have no choice. They have a gun to their head.
Do you know when you're going to release your documentary?
I am trying to get it done in the next 2 weeks. And then I'm going to be showing you certain technologies that already exist that you probably didn't know exist that are now going to be coming into the forefront. I'm going to talk about how this affects ufology.
And is this something you're working on independently, or do you have people assisting you?
This is actually, yes, I do. I'm really fortunate. I have a soundtrack that's going to be coming out too from the Brothers of Alien Rock. So that's really awesome. I'm like super grateful to have like any support from anybody. Really, I'm used to getting my teeth kicked in from like even trying to do anything with this. But like it's basically I'm going to show some stuff that you probably haven't seen. Also some UFO footage you probably haven't seen. And then I'm going to outline a theory that I have as to how we can use some of these technologies to maybe end the debate finally.
Because it does, I mean, it feels, even only having dipped my feet into the water, when I kind of look back, it feels like there have been many, many years of people saying disclosure is coming. It's right around the corner. It's about to, I mean, even when I'm on Twitter, every other day, someone's like, breaking news, here it comes. And it's just disorienting for that to happen I mean, for me, only having been super involved with it for the past few years, but for people such as yourself that have been involved with this for decades.
No, this is, again, it's different for me because I'm attached to this. Like, again, this is not a matter of faith for me. At some point, this will be known. This is physically real. This is going on. This is going to, at some point, something's going to happen, whether it's planned or not. That's going to force this issue.
So we know you don't trust Greer.
No.
What Shane and I are doing,
or Wilcox or anybody that pulls that.
I meant to say the anti-gravity device does, smack very similarly to David Wilcox free energy.
Now he's got, that's his flying car, which is just a terrible idea. Like, I mean, honestly, we don't need flying cars. I mean, like, could you imagine the news? It's like a drunk driver crashed his car into a living room of a skyscraper on the 12th floor. 60 people died.
It does seem like a few things need to be figured out before we go jumping into the flying cars. So I'm having to go through people very slowly because I don't see any other way to do it other than to kind of dive deep on a person or a couple of people and kind of sift through the information, kind of think about what feels like it could be legitimate, what obviously is not legitimate. So who do you trust?
Listen, yourself. You're going to have to make certain decisions. Choose wisely. Choose like think of it like choosing a medicine. Or something, or like, you're going to get a procedure or something. Do your research, like make sure you know what you're talking about. At the same time, be prepared to make mistakes. There's times when you can be disastrously wrong about something. That happens too, especially if you're like new or you're not like trained in like investigating. That's the other thing too. Learn to investigate. Learn how people investigate things. Learn as much math and science as you can. Those are the most valuable tools. The most valuable tool humanity has is reason and science and mathematics. Those things are paramount. Like, no amount of meditation or spirituality or channeling is going to get around that. There's a reason why all the progress is being made through math and science people and math and science adjacent people. This was always going to be the solution. We were never going to meditate our way through to this. We were never going to channel our way, into this. If channeling worked, it would have worked. It hasn't. What has worked? Proof, physical evidence. We need to maintain that mantra, physical evidence. This is real. This is a real thing. No more faith. We're not trying to convince people of a religion. Stop it. This is not something to aspire to. This is something that is happening to us. It is occurring all around us with increasing frequency. This is a physical thing. We need to start looking at it as a physical thing. Please stop trying to wrap up your issues with life and existence and your feelings, and in this issue. Stop projecting. We need to really dispassionately observe what's going on and take meticulous notes and data collection of this. And we're far away from making final decisions too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. And it seemed like in your previous interviews with Alien Addict, which I believe were both, or at least two of them were from 2019, you were pretty excited about TTSA, To the Stars Academy. Particularly, I remember you speaking about Tom DeLonge, but I remember from a conversation from an interaction we had on Twitter, you had said something to the effect of, it's Tom DeLonge all over again. So does that mean your opinions have changed?
No, like I meant Tom DeLonge all over again in the sense that people in ufology, like, I'm surprised at a lot of the things that are talked about a lot and the things that aren't really discussed. And it's like there's huge things in ufology that are like current, that are new, that aren't being discussed. And I meant that it wasn't a criticism of Tom DeLonge. We would not be here without Tom DeLonge. Everybody owes Tom DeLonge huge. And the fact that we don't give him.
Does that mean we also Blink 182? Huge.
Yeah. Well, hey,
it got him there
us to this point. Mm-hmm. I don't care what you like, dude. Like, I don't care if you love or hate Blink. The point is It's like, you know what, you could hate the taste of Coca-Cola, but your grandfather invented it and it paid for your education.
Mhm.
You know, God bless Coca-Cola. Like maybe you prefer Pepsi, but like the point of, you know what I'm saying? Like that's semantics.
Mhm.
The fact is, this is a guy that's done like incredible stuff for us, more than anybody, really. Him, and not only that, Elizondo and Mellon, the people he introduced us to. Really, all of this comes from Tom DeLonge, like
So,
directly.
To the
So
Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge, Elizondo, Mellon, these are the voices that you put the most stake as of this time in being legitimate voices.
There's other voices too, like Jacques Vallée. There's oh my God, there's so many now, actually. I put my trust in those that are taking us into a direction towards physical science.
And I know
physical reality.
Vallée, he's the guy that was testing the metals, right?
Yes.
So for Vallée in particular, I believe that, and it's been a long time since I've watched it, but there's a Rogan interview where when he's discussing the metals, he says that they've not found any of the metals to actually correspond to something not earthly or out of this world. So does that affect how you think of Vallée? Does that give you
No, it's actually this is the thing. They've found stuff that's like anomalous. There's something called the Craddock agreement that TTSA has with the Army.
Craddock?
Yeah.
Craddock? Okay.
It's basically we're using their labs to do research.
And Gary Nolan is also
he wasn't involved
not
in that,
anymore.
but,
okay.
But now he's like, yeah, but basically they've already found stuff that quote is extraordinary. This come from Elizondo. So there's stuff that's going on there. Like that's still in play. There is no, there's definitely something. There's definitely like major stuff that honestly that's not that's probably not our. And if it's ours, it's time travel, and that's a type of alien too. Actually, if you are from another dimension, you are an alien. Even if you were from Earth, that's how that works. The term alien is good. It still holds.
So I feel like I'm going to need to. I don't know that I'll have exactly the same investigation on Elizondo, Vallée, Nolan, etc. But I think in order to make judgments for myself, I'll have to do something kind of similar to that for each individual voice in the field, just because, like I said, there's so many people, there's so many things.
Yeah, and then after a while, you'll catch on to certain stuff, and you'll get better at like isolating those voices that seem to have more something to say, that is of interest.
Does it bother you that so my initial reaction to Elizondo, for instance, is he's CIA affiliated, correct?
Yeah.
And as was Doty. And I think back to the story of Paul Benowitz and how Doty destroyed his life. And I know you've seen Mirage Men because I've seen you make reference to it before. So I guess I have feelings attached to distrust regarding the CIA that even though I haven't gone very deep on Elizondo's stuff, I feel like my first red flag is like CIA's been doing a lot of funny business for a long time, and our other big voice is Doty, and he's
but you don't say that about the New York Times when you pick it up or you read it or when you watch the news. CIA is all over that as well. Everything you do has CIA all over it. I've heard any company with the name General in the title, there's a reason why it's there. Like you've lived your whole life this way. You're not a part of this.
So your point would be
like
that
this is like
they've infiltrated
this is
all
life.
things.
It's how things work. You just don't know. And I'm not even on some crazy conspiracy thing like, oh, they are everywhere, but it's not like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, they're tapping my phone calls. Yeah, they're tapping everybody's phone calls. You're not special.
So in your opinion, that wouldn't be a reason to just immediately write someone off?
No, like this, who else would know about these things? Who does this type of research and and gets funding and stuff like that and can't talk about it? It's them. listen, this idea that this is going to come from outside and is going to destroy the government and there's going to be righteousness and flaming the guilty, they're going to get it, and like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton are going to be in prison, and like, you know, and everybody else that you don't like, you know, and they'll get, you know, whatever revenge fantasy you have, you know, that's not what this is going to be, you know, and that's good. You know, we need change from within. Change from within is a lot more preferable than change from outside. Disasters happen more often than not with visceral change from outside. You don't want that. You know, and
so you believe disclosure will come from the government in all likelihood?
I think that, listen, I believe that there's a bunch of factors coalescing that are gonna catch up in and around the same time. Call it a singularity type event. And it is going to be too much. And I think they already know. I think they know. They have a gun to their head. They have to get out in front of this, because it would be worse if something happens and they're caught completely off guard. At least now, like before, they used to have things like X-Files and stuff. So there's a little voice in your ear talking about the possibility of these things. It's just fantasy. And maybe now that voice is a little bit louder and it's speaking as fact and still in the periphery. But eventually that sound's going to get bigger and it's going to start coming from here too. And then eventually, you know, this is going to be, you know, it's going to be the zeitgeist. It's going to be what is. And people will just have to get used to this. And it's like, it's inevitable. Like, listen, this is physically real. This is happening. This is going to come out sooner rather than later. People need to get prepared for this, however they mentally are going to prepare for this. There's a lot of weird stuff that's going to come out of this. There's already people talking about genetic engineering, including like Lozano and others are talking about that we have been subject to genetic interventions by non-human and advanced beings. That this is going to affect every aspect of everything we think. Every aspect of everything we think. And you know, and unfortunately, I don't believe that. Like they try to say, oh, religion and science will come together. No, I don't believe that. I think they're just saying that to make people feel better. I think that this is going to be checkmate for science, and then all that other stuff is just going to be like, you know, where baby rattles come from?
No.
Baby rattles were actually magic. The shamans would use.
Oh,
rattles,
okay.
And then over time we outgrew that, but we still had use for those things and we gave them to the babies. So it's basically like we're losing those training wheels, you know.
And I will say, so, you know, it's easy to think disclosure is you know, boy cried wolf sort of situation. It's coming. But I do see your point that, you know, we have fiction that brings this into the popular consciousness. Now we have things in the news, New York Times. I can see the logic to that argument.
Yeah, it's like oh well, that's like they're intelligence agents. It's like pot calling the kettle black. You know, it's like that's neither here nor there. It's like and you know that's not actually really relevant. This discussion is how valid is that information. Now, we're getting everything? No, absolutely not. But they're at least telling us we're not getting everything. You know, and that stands to reason. And honestly, this idea that we're going to just let everything fall where that's just ridiculous. You know, and advocating that doesn't make you brave or righteous or woke. It makes you stupid and perhaps even dangerous.
And that's where my empathy for wanting to research a lot of this stuff comes in. Is, you know, I feel like at least some degree of my childhood was impacted by religious and political, you know, abuse. And I hate to, having now gotten away from that, I hate to see something that has been so fun and interesting for me, being used as a tool to manipulate other people.
Honestly, when I don't care what religion it is, it's always some type of pyramid scheme of somebody making a lot of money, sexually abusing the parishioners. And then when they get tired of that, they go after the children.
Mhm.
Time and again, every religion, every single one, all of them, something isn't working to insist, oh, we're going to get it right with this. No, no, you're not. You know, that's clearly not where the answers lie. And clearly somebody's playing a game with you. So
and we're in a time that people that are the arbiters of those situations are having a much more difficult time hiding. So I will be interested to see what potentially comes out as this develops with, you know, I'm not making any claims about Steven Greer and what he may or may not have done, but I will be watching the people that I've ruled out as being reliable or credible sources on UFOlogy, just to see, okay, what other fraudulent things have they gotten involved with as
oh yeah,
as
no,
they
there's
continue.
listen, there's stories. I could tell you stories, but we would have to do another whole episode.
Well, I suppose so. That gives me, I'm excited to know who you feel is credible.
I'll give you reasons too. I'll tell you why I'm saying that, and then you can go and check it out. You know, and there's and trust me, there's no lack of hijinks in this subject and the characters involved in the subject. It's like, you know what it is? When you prohibit something and make something non-exist that does, you don't make it go away. You make it so that it's underserved, and then the worst people get involved and start running it. At the same time, and on a smaller level, you have, you know, the other, you know, when they made UFOs try to go away, even though they existed, you had this influence of these con men and these people that are like basically preying on well-meaning folks that have perhaps a legitimate, you know, concern about this issue or need to know about these things, and taking them for a ride. And it's almost like by design. You put enough of these charlatans in to cause all these troubles, and the most reasonable person who might have had a legitimate experience will just want to back off and leave, you know, and you can't, like, you know.
And like you said, that's all things. That's not even,
yes,
that just seems like a pattern of the way
yes,
the world
exactly.
works. Yeah.
But the difference is that things kept happening to me. I kept trying to run screaming from this subject many, many times in my life. It won't let me. And seeing as how things are turning out, I'm glad.
And you're referring to other experiences you
Yes.
had, correct?
Yeah.
Well,
like
who are the experiencer voices that you find to be legitimate? Or do you have, or are there any that you find compelling or more likely to be legitimate than others? Or is that something?
The ones that I find legitimate are people that you probably have never heard of. Again, there's I'm very careful with that. Like I said, like you got to feel them out, and you know, it's like you recognize certain things. There's certain people you recognize. I don't mean always saw each other on the UFO. I mean, like there's something like, oh, this guy, this lady knows what they're talking about. Something happened to them, you know, that things stick out. And there's other people that make these claims that are kind of like odd. And I don't mean high strangeness. I mean odd. And after a while, you kind of get a feeling for what's legit high strangeness and what's, like, you know, Stan Roman at throwing pencils at his face. You know, like there's a difference, and I understand, like, that doesn't do non-experiencers any good. I know, like but I'll tell you, man, I will keep trying to figure out how to figure out a way so that it does do non-experiencers some good. You know,
and I appreciate that empathy. I really do. It's frustrating to have conversations when people are just like,
no,
why don't you believe? It's like, well,
no, it's not even that. Like I'm like, gosh, I want this to see this. And it's not even so like, and be like, you know, I'm the new Steven Greer, aha, you know, no, it's like, no, you need to see this. You need to know this. These things are important. This is going to change a lot of stuff once you figure this out. You know, once you see these things, a lot of things are going to start falling into place, and a lot of things will just go away because they don't, you know, and won't in this new paradigm. This is going to be Like this is a huge deal. They've been keeping this secret for a very long time for very good reasons, because this is going to get really, really interesting real fast.
And I would imagine that has to be in part your motivation for making the documentary you are making, which in turn seems, I mean, that means you then will be one of those people. I mean, not that you haven't been up until now, but especially if you're producing new content for right now, people are going to be looking at your stuff and vetting you, so to speak.
Oh, of course.
So
Yeah.
what would you say to those that will be vetting you in regard to your documentary after they've seen it?
Well, everything is honest and well researched and can be cited. There's not a lot of conjecture in what I'm going to be presenting. And
are you going to provide the sources that you're referencing?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, this is stuff that's going to be easy to find once you find out about it. You probably won't find it if you're not looking, because you don't know to look. But you'll find out through this.
So is that your core motivation? You want to show people where to look, or is there some other reason?
I'm going to present the data, and then I'm going to present my theory involving how this data can be best used. And then I'm going to put it out there, and I'm going to see if anybody likes it, and then perhaps we can move forward into trying to get to testing some of this out and seeing if it works or not.
So I'll be sure to I'll update the description once that is out to link to your documentary. I'll be sure to have your alien addict interviews, the MTV special you were involved with when you were 19. It's not an interview per se, but where you filmed where you were with your mother when you saw the craft when you were 7 years old. I'll be sure to have all of that. Is there anything else in regard to you, your work, your studies that I should include, or you want to point people to?
My Twitter account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, your handle is.
The Disclosure Revolution with Osvaldo Franco, which is also going to be the name of my show.
So where will we see your show? Is this going to be YouTube or?
Yeah, YouTube, and perhaps other platforms as they, become available. If it's a thing that makes sense to do.
Well, I'm excited to see more voices join into the conversation. That's, I wanted to join the conversation. That's why we're doing this.
Oh yeah, I feel that we need to have more of we need a drastically different approach. The old ufology is dying on the moment.
Right. It can't just all be big voices, because a lot of those people have failed us. So I think having conversations at a more grassroots level has to be advantageous.
I'm a reform-minded ufologist. I've always been a reform-minded ufologist. I almost left again, just a few years ago, because I was just like, nothing was going to change. And I felt like I was just, drowning in debating religious nut jobs, and making no progress. And then a light TTSA showed up, and look at where we are now. Literally, say whatever you will, everything changed because of TTSA, and the changes that are coming now, it's all because of that as well.
Well, I'll be sure to look more specifically at TTSA, Jacques Vallée, and the other people that you've mentioned in this interview. Is there anything else you'd like to leave the people that have hung on to the end of this interview with?
No, I guess that's it for now.
For now, yeah. And like I said, I'd love for you to be able to speak to Shane. He's got a slightly different viewpoint than I do. So maybe sometime down the road.
Let me know. I love talking about this. I'll make time. I guess that's about it. If you got any questions, anybody, seek me out on Twitter, and feel free to ask me anything. I will answer anything that I can.
Yes. Well, thank you, everybody. I know your time is important. Thank you for spending it with myself and Osvaldo as we talked about his own experiences and his path through ufology for the past few decades. We really appreciate it. If you like, share, hit the notification bell, subscribe, and see more content like this in the future. Thank you.